you. Did you know that the hashtag comes directly from messy handwriting? It's true. The shape originated with writers who just couldn't be bothered to write more neatly and so inadvertently invented a new symbol instead. I'll show you. Raise your hand if you used phones before the internet. So you know that before it was a hashtag, it was a pound sign. But why? Here's the fun part. Because it's a bastardization of LB. LB entered English as an abbreviation for pound in the 1300s. It's short for libra, which was the Roman term for the same weight. In addition to shortening the word to 2 letters, they added a line through the middle, which was a way to indicate a contraction back then. But in quick handwriting, it looked like this. Here's an actual example from Isaac Newton. And then over time, it evolved, or devolved if you're a punctilious penmanship purist, into this. And there you have it, the pound sign. Those 4 lines are an L and a B. How did all of this become today's ubiquitous hashtag? That's for another video. All right, we're making our way through this book, talking about the ever so exciting history of punctuation. Come along if you want.
The Ampersand is a piece of graffiti named by a bunch of potty-mouthed school children. We've been going through this book, talking about fun punctuation history. Come along, this one's a trip. It didn't all start in 79 AD when Pompeii was buried in 15 feet of volcanic ash, but that calamity is what preserved the first known ampersand. It's clearly just a combination of Latin et, meaning and, but writers took to it, and within a few short centuries, the symbol evolved to the form we use today. But it didn't get its English name until some inattentive school children from the 1800s got a hold of it. Back then, it was so common that they actually tacked it onto the end of the alphabet like a 27th letter. So kids reciting the alphabet would say W, X, Y, Z, and per se and. But these mumbling kids who didn't really know what they were saying just figured it was the name of the character, not a phrase about it. A 1905 slang dictionary reported that and per se and was variously interpreted as am zoomsy zan and am pussy am, among quite a few others. But from the rubble of all these mondegreens arose ampersand. Because kids also have a sense of humor that will make anything a little bit inappropriate, that same slang dictionary defines ampersand as the posteriors. There it is at the back of the alphabet, so why shouldn't it be a fun new word for ass? And here we thought this symbol was kind of fancy. Nope. All right, this one's just for the language nerds. Everyone else move along. You're going to get bored, I promise. All right, now that it's just us, did you know that the comma used to be a slash? In the 7th century, there was an Italian writer who wanted to indicate pauses at the end of his phrases, and so he started putting a slash there. And then over time, it was minimized and sort of became like a subscript, but it makes perfect sense. Our little comma down there, it's just a little slash, and it means, hey, wait a second. So fucking cute. Anyway, I learned that this morning, and I immediately went and bought a book on the history of punctuation, so, you know, look forward to some more scintillating, comma, semicolon, and exclamation point facts. It's gonna get crazy around here. I just learned why paragraphs are indented and got literal chills. It's a ghost story. First off, that empty space at the beginning of a paragraph is actually punctuation. In medieval writing, a mark evolved called the pilcrow. More commonly, the paragraph symbol. It was incredibly common because it was used to denote the beginning of a paragraph. This was before paragraphs came with line breaks, so pilcrows were especially important amid the huge blocks of unbroken text. As saving space on parchment became less important, people started putting paragraphs on new lines. But the pilcrow got to keep its place of honor at the beginning of each one. Now the fun part. In the creation of fancy documents like this, each scribe had a different role. The person who did the common writing wasn't the same person who went in and did the fancy pilcrows. So the amanuensis who did the main writing would leave space for a rubricator to come in later with their red ink. But they were working on a deadline apparently, and the rubricator didn't always have a chance to do their job. So then the document would just go out with blank space at the beginning of every paragraph. Paragraph after paragraph with prominent vacancies awaiting flourishes that would never come. Thus, to this very day, every paragraph you read is haunted by the ghost of a pilcrow. All right, I'm making my way through this book, talking about punctuation. Come along if you feel like it.
My bartender tonight was giving the person next to me the URL to sign up for their rewards program, and she was like, it's diner dash hyphen dash. And then she looks at me like I would be able to clarify, is it a dash or a hyphen? Why did she think I could tell? She didn't know me. How does she know that I know the difference between a dash and a hyphen? Do I have a punctuation face? I let her muddle through it, but I do know the answer, and I'll tell you. A hyphen is what goes in between 2 words when you want to make them 1 word. Dashes are a bit more complicated. There's a variety of types. But in a URL, it's a hyphen. But you can say dash, because everyone's going to know what you mean. Here's something to be angry about if you're a native English speaker.
Let's talk about the @ sign.
We're making our way through this book, talking about punctuation history of all things. It's uncertain where the @ sign came from visually, but here's the most likely theory. To save space on paper, scribes would abbreviate common words with the first letter and a line over the top. And then in hurried handwriting, of course, it would become this. An additional little flourish turned it into that. But that's not the main thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about what we call it. A 1997 survey found the name of the @ sign in 37 different languages. I'll sit down for these so I can show you examples.
It's a pig's tail in Norwegian,
A monkey's tail in Dutch,
and a spider monkey in German,
elephant's trunk in Swedish and Dutch,
a worm in Hungarian.
roll mop herring in Czech and Slovak.
I did not know what a roll mop herring was.
It's a pickled herring fillet rolled into the shape of an @ sign.
Finally, in Turkish, it's a rose.
And what do we get?
I had to stand back up for this part.
@ sign.
What the hell?
How boring is that? You can email me at abrahampickledherring@abrahampiper.com. I'm just kidding. I don't know how to set up an email address at my website. All right, there's more to say about the @ sign, so I'm sorry, but this is going to be a two-parter. Come along if you feel like it. Which do you think traveled further, the first email or the first phone call? To answer that, let's talk about the history of the @ sign. I promised you a part 2. I kind of regret it, but here you go. The first known use of the @ sign is from 1345, but it didn't really take off until 1971. Programmer Ray Tomlinson had just come up with a way to message not just another computer, that already existed, but a specific person at another computer. But how to denote that person and their computer? Looking at his keyboard, he chose the @ sign. Thus, the very first email address. Then, from a second computer, Tomlinson sent himself a message. The very first email. Ensuring, among other things, that the @ sign would have a permanent place in the pantheon of punctuation. Now, how far did this email travel? All the way across the room. And what about the very first phone call about 100 years earlier? Well, that went the whopping distance of all the way into the next room. Oh, one more fun fact. Tomlinson invented email while he was supposed to be working on something else, so he was a little nervous about his bosses finding out about it. Anyone else kind of wish he'd kept it a secret? All right, we're making our way through this book, talking about the occasionally fascinating history of punctuation. Come along if you feel like it. There's a swear word that's actually a punctuation mark. Or a stand-in anyway. A mild epithet, if you will. Have you ever heard anyone fake swear using dashed? What the dash? Okay, it sounds dumb in my accent. It's more of a British thing. I'll show you an example in a minute, but first, why dash? It comes from the punctuation mark. Beginning in the 1600s, the dash was used to hide information that an author wanted to keep secret. So Mr. Baxter, for instance, might become a Mr. B with a dash to protect his privacy. Side note, in taking on this role, the dash became one of the only punctuation marks used to obfuscate language rather than make it clearer. As this convention spread, a very common use was to cover up words that publishers thought might offend their audiences. A damned noise became, or the devil you do was. And here's the fun part. Over time, this moved to spoken English too, where people also wanted to swear and not get in trouble. So they just said it how it was written. Dashed.
Dash achieves user intelligence.
Hey, we're making our way through this book, talking about the history of punctuation of all things. Come along if you feel like it.
Oh, Pickery, for God's sake, stop being dashed and do something!